afternoon, and welcome to the 2025 Kellogg Super Bowl Ad Review Learnings and Highlights. I'm Tim Calkins.
I'm Derek Rucker.
And together, we're going to take you through today some of the highlights from the advertising from this year's Super Bowl. So our goal today is very simple. We want to see what we can learn about marketing and about advertising from what happened at the game this year. And it was quite a game.
Especially if you're a Philadelphia fan.
Exactly right. Otherwise, I'm sticking with the point that I think the advertising overall this year was a little better than the football. But I'm from Buffalo, so take that as you will. Our agenda today, we'll start off a little bit why this advertising matters so much. Why does it make sense to talk about the advertising and focus on it? Then we'll tell you a little bit about the ad review and what we did this year with our Kellogg students. We'll talk about highlights from the results. We're going to talk about some of the best, some of the spots that missed, and then we'll talk about a few other interesting spots along the way. Finish up with some learnings and all of that. So a lot to cover today as we get into it. But let me start, though, with a little bit around why the Super Bowl is so important. You know, we've been doing this for 20 years
21 years is the anniversary,
right?
Yeah,
people keep saying the Super Bowl, you know, it's going to fade away, but it doesn't. It actually just gets bigger and bigger. Some of the most expensive advertising in the world this year, up over $8 million for a 30-second spot. I mean, it's all negotiated, but there was a lot of demand this year. And so what happened is prices were really high. Advertisers want to be part of the event.
And Tim, that $8 million, that's just the media buy. So, you know, you hire a celebrity, that might be another $5 million, production's another $1 million. So
for sure,
this can escalate very quickly from an already high number.
Yeah, and I think the longest spot we saw this year was 2 minutes. So you do the math on this. It's a lot of investment. It's a lot of money. The largest U.S. audience for any show by far. So, you know, really interesting viewership of the Super Bowl. This is through 2024. This year's numbers, by the way, just came out 113. So that's going to be down a little bit off the 123 from last year, but still a pretty darn high number. It's a huge number of people. Also, the basic trend on Super Bowl viewership is trending up. More and more people are watching this thing relative to other media events. That's really extraordinary. I think that's one of the big reasons why people are paying the dollars to be here.
Yeah, it's hard to get that coverage anywhere else. You're going to have to buy a lot of other media, so that price tag adds up too.
Right, and that's also very diffused. This I thought was interesting. This is a chart we had last year, but you know, the viewership on the other shows, the other big events is really declining, sort of fragmenting. Only the Super Bowl's holding up. And as a place to go to reach people, it's more and more unique in the world. This I thought was interesting. Shows people are watching in 2024. If you look at the shows, what is everybody watching on a regular basis? Well, you know what they're watching? They're watching football. Number one thing, Sunday night NFL. Number two, Monday night NFL. Number three, Thursday night NFL. You know, I'm an innovative person. I can think about where we might go next, you know. And no, people watch NFL, and it's amazing, the viewership. It all makes it really, really important for these advertisers. The one people actually want to watch the advertising, I think we saw that this year, you know, in a game like that.
Yeah, when it's 34-0, and you're saying, what should we be doing? Advertising might be your friend.
Well, it is, because that's the one thing. I actually think, and maybe in some ways it worked to the advantage of the advertisers this year.
Yeah, you're at the Super Bowl party. What's left to do? So I think it can, and I think it's one of those, you know, with only two teams in the game, sometimes what's left is my teams aren't there. So what I'm most interested in? Yeah.
Well, exactly right. Having something to eat, being with some friends, but then watching some good advertising. A lot of press attention, which is a big part of it, and then a huge amount of social media focus. More and more, that's the game. You know, how do you come up with interesting things to talk about on social media? And I think more and more that's part of the mix here for Super Bowl. It's not just a Super Bowl ad. It really is an integrated campaign. What some of these companies are doing is really astonishing to see, all the pregame activities and all the...
Yeah, it used to be that this was the spot, right? Like we create the Super Bowl spot, it's beautiful, it airs, and we're done. And now it's, what's your overarching Super Bowl plan? What are you doing before, during, after? So that's changed.
Yeah. And for a lot of companies, they kick off something here on the Super Bowl, and then it's the whole year. Flows off and just drives.
For sure.
So the Super Bowl ad review, if you're familiar with what we do here at Kellogg, and if you're watching this, you probably are, but we've been doing this now since 2005. So this is our 21st year of running the event. Format remains the same. Get a panel of the MBA students together to evaluate the spots. We picked the panel pretty carefully. The marketing club here at Kellogg helps us do that. I think we had 200 people apply for the panel this year. So
a lot of interest.
A lot of interest, and we ended up picking 72 to join us on the panel on Sunday night during the game. It's all about experiential learning. That's really what it's about more than anything, but also thought leadership, and we come up with our rankings, which are really interesting to see what's involved. And there's our event this year, and you can get the scene of it there. That's sort of the general setting of it, and here's some of our panelists, folks around the panel getting ready for the event. There people are sort of settled in, and it's it's a really fun event. You get a chance to get together and watch some advertising and all of that, and I think it's for many of the students, I think it's a really good learning experience, but really fun, and a chance to put to use a lot of these folks who taken your class.
The exciting thing is we talk about advertising and how to critique it strategically that we'll get into. So these people have taken the class, and now they do it real time in a high stakes environment. So it's a lot of fun. It's a very full circle moment.
Yeah, exactly. And now more and more as time goes on, we hear from the people creating these ads who at the time were back on the panel in the day, and now they're on the other side. And that's always fun.
It's an exciting thing that we actually have a lot of great Kellogg alums who are creating a lot of great advertising. So it's real fun.
Exactly right. So the thing that's unique about what we do is we try to think about business impact, not just likability and humor. And the way we do this is we use the ADPLAN framework. So it's a classic framework we've been using. Right? Do you want to walk us through it there?
Sure, yeah. So this is one of the things we teach here in our advertising strategy course at Kellogg. And the idea is to elevate conversations with the creative team or around the creative work so that we make sure we move from just I like the ad to it changes how consumers think or how customers think, and it motivates action. Yeah. So the framework starts out with attention. This is one of the things our creative partners typically strive for. They want people to watch the ad and engage. And Tim, you know as well as anyone, in the Super Bowl, this is really hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really tough to grab people's attention. There's so much going on. How do you do that? That's your first job, but you got to do it.
Yeah, they're willing to watch the ads, let's be clear, but you have such high competition that only a few really go, oh, I remember and I want to really 100%. Watch that one again. So related to that is distinction. Distinction is interesting. That's really separating yourself apart. Mm-hmm. And you see some of the most distinct creative work on the Super Bowl. But as we'll review, some of that more distinct creative work actually falls flat when it comes to changing beliefs. So distinction is something we care about, but it's not everything.
Correct. Absolutely right.
Positioning, this is among my favorites. I often think of great strategists or architects. We're trying to help consumers see the brand in the way we see the brand, in a way that will be effective for them. So we look at, do you identify yourself with the right category? And do you get across the benefit? Is there a reason to consider or to use you?
Correct.
And we'll see some good advertising, and we'll see some. Yeah. We're scratching our head. Like,
often it's the positioning, I think, that sometimes separates the strongest spots from the ones that fall towards the middle because they just get their positioning across. We'll see that this year, actually.
Absolutely. There's some great there's some really good strategic thinking. And again, there's some questionable strategic thinking.
Absolutely.
Linkage, I always love linkage because it seems on the surface so simple. Like, just remember that it was for me. And yet, from time to time, we see the students look at us during the review like, what was that for? It's like, that's not our job to tell you. That's a linkage problem.
Yeah. And you see that all too often show up. And I think it's a bid to do the first couple, attention and distinction, and then you lose your linkage.
Well, and it's the assumption that if the consumer sees your ad, they'll make the connection. That's not true.
Right.
Your job is to help them make the connection.
Right. Absolutely.
Now, amplification, that's a fancier word, but what it really means is, does the target respond favorably? So we don't care per se if Derek personally likes the ad, but for the target audience, do they like the ad? We'll talk about some ads today, which, they kind of leave a bad taste in your mouth, Tim, and that's not what you want to spend your ad dollars on.
That's exactly right.
And then finally, net equity. Net equity, great brands over time, those that have become category leaders often, they have natural association. So what a great manager does is make sure they never undermine that equity they've established. So we also look for that. Like, hey, have they just done something that runs affront to who they are?
Correct. And the challenge is it's not a weighting system. It's got to be all the stuff if it's really going to work.
I think the best ads, they succeed on everything, right? And when you have deficits, you'll see some brands will solve for it through other media channels. So it's like, I've got everything, but maybe you won't remember me. I'll do a social blast around it. So when you think of this for our panel, they're just looking at the individual spots. For a brand, you, of course, want to think of your entire marketing ecosphere.
Got it. There we go. All right, well, let's get to it. We got a lot of spots to look at and to talk about, so let's get to the 2025 results. So let's start off then today with some of the hits, some of the good ones this year, and we want to take a look at a few of the very best that ran, and then we'll give you our thoughts on them and sort of give us our perspective on those. But let us start now with the number one spot this year, a spot that surprised me and many others. We did not expect to see this one at this point in the rankings, but here it is. Let's take a look.
I see you looking at me. I see you looking at me.
That you get lift, you get height, you get power.
Your attention, please. I steal the show. And now you know I'm gonna keep on dancing, so you can keep on glancing. It ain't my fault that I was made this way. I see you looking at me.
Really?
Let's go. Watch me now, attention now. Let's go. Watch me now, attention now. Let's go. Attention.
Let's start paying attention to breasts when it matters the most. Early detection for breast cancer is a game changer and why I'm able to be here today. So let's get more women screened than ever before. Go to yourattentionplease.com and take the first step.
All right, there we go. So our number one spot, that spot, what's your take on it there, Derek?
You know, I think this is one you could imagine what it must have been like to bring forth this creative idea, right? Because for a lot of firms, it's like, hold on, this could be viewed as highly sexualized, therefore inappropriate, and we're going to upset a lot of people. But I think what they do is they navigate that straight by starting with something that is grabbing attention per our framework.
Yeah.
But then they do a beautiful transition to something that's really important and serious to the consumer. And they're here to help. And so I think that's one of those cases where it's like, because ads might be viewed as sometimes having sex appeal, doesn't mean it's like, oh, don't talk about it at all. This was a way to funnel attention to a rather serious message. And I applaud the brand for figuring out how to navigate that.
Yeah, I mean, they really hit a interesting balance. I bet the edit process on that was so intense. I bet every shot, everything was sort of thought through on that spot. Ultimately, though, it really works. They like thread this needle of grabbing attention, but then delivering a really serious message. The linkage, I think, really works here. But importantly, it's not linkage to the brand. Like nobody really knows or cares that that's Novartis, but I don't think that's the point. The point is around the testing and the screening. And you want to make sure this spot is linked to that. And I think that connection, they draw pretty nicely.
They do a nice job, you know. Again, I think a difficult play, if you will, to make. And, you know, if I think back to ads of the past, this might be one of the best examples of a brand doing it.
Yeah, really nice job. Now, of course, the backstory on this, if you're wondering, like, why are they doing this? Well, Novartis has one of their drugs that they have in market is Kisqali, which is a first-line therapy for early-stage breast cancer. Now, the only way you can get that product, though, is if you've caught early before the cancer has spread, which means screening becomes super important. If you get screened too late, right? Number one, you don't get treated with this product, but also you don't benefit from the product. So that's why they're really trying to push people to get screened early, because you got some options that are open to you early that aren't open late. So it's not just the company doing good things for society. It also is a business interest. But in a way, they're aligned here.
It's a win-win, right?
I think that's exactly right. The company does well, but the company does well only if people are getting screened, diagnosed, and treated. Ultimately, that's what healthcare is really all about.
And that helps the consumer, so that's a good outcome.
Bravo to that. Nicely done. I don't know if we ever expected to see a pharma ad on top of the rankings, but there we are.
There we go.
There we are. They're first for everything. Let's keep going. Here's another spot. Got a lot of attention this year. Also finished with a grade of A. So let's take a look, and then we'll talk about this one.
I can't believe they let us back in this place.
Oh, no good?
No.
Oh. There we go.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, boy.
So good. Oh, it is so.
This one's real.
Oh. Woo.
And that is a sandwich.
I'll have what she's having.
You know, that's when we talked about this. So if you don't have the context of the movie When Harry Met Sally, the ad still works, right?
It's amazing, but it does, though. It really does.
It funnels you, and this is what we talk about with positioning, into the benefit. What is this about? This is about great taste.
Yeah, and it's about a great tasting sandwich. And it was interesting that this did so well with our panel because our panel, of course, skews younger. So I was sitting next to a couple students at this event, and I asked them, do you know what the reference? And they're like, no, I don't know the reference. I got nothing. But it didn't matter. It still works.
They still understood the benefit.
If you get it, it works. If you don't get it, it works. It's just really sort of nicely done. Two things are interesting in particular for me. One is, can you imagine the licensing? Yeah, how do you get the approvals to do that? That's an iconic scene. So bravo to whoever managed to do that negotiation. The other thing, there's an interesting pivot here for Hellmann's, to the use on a sandwich. For past several years, they've been pushing leftovers as a use occasion. Here, they're back to the core sandwich use. I bet that's reinforcing more the core behavior, probably a more promising place for them to go to see an impact. But we'll see how that plays out. But an interesting pivot.
Yeah, definitely, from trying to make more of your leftovers to let's just go right to the benefit once again on the sandwich.
Correct. There you go. So that was really nicely done. The highlight also, by the way, look at the linkage in there.
Yeah.
You see the product and the whole spot goes from bad sandwich to great sandwich. All about it.
It's a nice example of, we'll sometimes hear like, oh, but if the brand is in there too much, it ruins the story. The brand can certainly be part of the story, and the ad can still be very effective.
I mean, be careful of that. Anytime an advertising person tells you, the brand is making it boring, yeah, that's a bad sign. Probably work with a different group of people. Let's keep going. Take another look at one of the great spots that ran this year.
We'll do 2 Michelob Ultras.
Excuse me, would you consider playing us?
For the Ultras.
Oh, we're kind of at a high level.
Fascinating.
You guys sure you want this?
Please serve. That was fun. Play for those ultras.
They got Ultras.
Whip it real hard. Whip it real hard. Every day I'm hustling.
You know we're professional athletes, right?
What sport?
Every day I'm hustling. Ah!
I smell Ultra.
Play for an ultra?
Now, that's probably my favorite from this year's Super Bowl.
All right. Wow, that's a big statement. There's a lot of advertising.
There's a lot. I'll tell you what I like about it. Like, it's kind of neat to see a beer brand on top getting an A from our panel, right? I think this was among the best performing two ads. But I think what's great is something you and I talk a lot about is when you bring in celebrities, there's a danger the celebrity overshadows the ad, right? Yeah. They get in front of it. And here's one where it's like, if you don't know William Dafoe, Catherine O'Hara, it doesn't matter. If you know them, they still don't distract you from what the core ad is about, which is the links they'll go to hustle people and to win that Michelob Ultra. So to me, it's just an ad that is pure in form, simple to the point, and works. So it was among my favorite. I think it's my favorite.
There you go. No, I'm with you. It's a great spot. I also really like how it fits with the equity of the brand. You're talking about that net equity. And Michelob Ultra, they've been positioning that as all about sort of sports and fitness and for people. And that it just is right there. It's very consistent with everything we know about that brand. So it fits. The message is good. I'm with you. That's a great spot.
And they show all that without having to tell all of it, right? So that's, again, a beautiful piece of creative work when it's like, they're showing you the story. They're not telling it to you.
There you go. All right. So if we're agreed on that spot, this spot, I think maybe you'd say we have a little bit less maybe alignment on. So let's get to this one, an interesting spot to sort of think about.
If I was a flower growing wild and free, I'd want you to be my sweet honeybee. And if I was a tree growing tall and green, all I'd want you to shade me, be my leaves. If you were a river in the mountains tall, the roll of the water would be. If you were the winter, I'd know I'd be the snow, just as long as you were with me when the cold winds blow. If you were a wink, I'd be a nod. If you were a seed, well, I'd be a pod. If you were a floor, I'd want to be a rug. And if you were a kiss, I know I'd be a hug.
Oh, there you go. All right, now, that was an A from the panel. So that was one of the great spots on the Super Bowl this year. And you're a big fan of that, right?
I like what the brand's trying to do here, moving up to more emotional space. So one of the things we teach at Kellogg is that when the functional space becomes very well known, we know what the product is, we know what it does, we try to create a more emotional connection. Now that takes time, and I think that's where you have some hesitations about whether this is going to see fruition long term.
Well, it's a sweet spot. How do you not like that spot? I love the scene where she's out with the umbrella in the rain, and that's just, it's great. It's great stuff. So 2 things about it, though, that I sort of wonder about. One, it feels a little bit like a force for the Lay's equity. So I don't think of Lay's as sort of a small farmer, small town sort of brand. To me, it's like a big company, and
for sure.
And it also doesn't seem like a sweets brand, if you will. Like it doesn't seem. So I wonder about the connection with the equity of Lay's in this case. The other thing, the whole story to me is a little bit of a funny story. She takes a potato, she plants a potato, and then she later harvests the potato, which seems highly inefficient. The whole experience here.
Maybe it'll produce more potatoes. But I think the thing is, when you see an ad like this, Tim, I want to see, will they continue to play along? Because if they run more ads to try to, as you said, maybe you don't think of them this way right now. But with enough ads, people might start to think of them this way. If this is a one and done, then I think I also would go back and question the strategy. Like, this is not going to make you all of a sudden say, Lay's is a very emotional brand that's connected with me in this sweet way.
Correct.
So the future of this brand, I think, is an interesting
That's right. And also, maybe there's some competitive dynamics going on here that tell them that, people don't feel warm about Lay's, but the competitors, they do, and you got to fix that. So there could be more to that story, but it's sort of an interesting one to look at. The other great spots, here's the A's. So this is our collection of them. So there's the ones we've talked about. Also Instacart, T-Mobile, Liquid Death. Google was up there. Nike made it onto the list this year. So some really impressive advertisers.
Yeah, it was a good, if you look at the top crop, I think there were some really nice spots and some interesting brands to see. See Nike come back. Google, not a surprise. They always kind of are understanding their audience. But overall, there are some brands that should be really happy with the work they provided.
Absolutely. Yeah, always really fun to see the hits here. Okay, let's cut over. We got to get to the other side of things because not every ad was a terrific hit on the game this year. Let's talk about a few of them that missed, at least according to our panel.
Our panel, yeah.
So that's what we bring to this party. But let's take a couple of the spots that sort of didn't maybe go as well as they could have. And let's start off with this one here.
Let's go, dogs. I'm a dancing tongue, and I like the taste of chloroform. Have you ever seen a tongue do this? Yeah, help me make chloroform. Give me chloroform. Everybody now. Give me chloroform. Give me chloroform.
So, so our panel did not like this ad. It got a D. And I think
it did. Yeah.
And I think it's a great example of, what are they looking at? This is not a problem with positioning. I get there's a benefit being conveyed here. Like, this is tasty.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The issue is what we call amplification, which is when people see the focus on the tongue, all of a sudden they're like, that's kind of gross. I don't want to be thinking about that. And so it's not that I don't get your messaging, but you're detracting from that benefit. And I think that's what... Right. For our panel, at least, didn't work in the spot.
Yeah, I think it was like too much tongue. Like the cowbell, too much. But it's I think in this case it's too. That big tongue comes out and they start waving around and dancing and that's what you remember. That's what sticks with you is this rather unappealing tongue.
Well, and I think that's the key. That it's also like something. That negativity, that visceral reaction. That we saw this in the room. Like literally as this is executing, people are like. It's like, that's a potential issue right there.
Exactly. They also showed at the end that usage occasion where they were just like taking it right out of the can.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's a warming the heart moment either. It's just, I don't know. It doesn't seem
It's a good way to
like
get
that.
More usage, or I guess get people to try it. But, it's not that the strategy here of focusing on taste isn't useful. It could be a very great product. It just makes you wonder, like, strategically, could it have been done better, right? Could the strategy have guided a little more? Like, here's some watch outs. Don't offend the consumer.
Yes. Or maybe what happened here is they had that sort of the strategy, but then in the bid to be, get awareness and be distinctive. I mean, this was the only tongue we saw in the Super Bowl. So that's different. I give them credit for that. But what happens is that then overwhelms the rest of it.
Right. And keep in mind, we don't observe the specific target audience. So there's also a possibility there's a generation that is not our MBA students who go, oh, yeah, I like that. We can't rule that out completely.
Possible. Could be.
But there could be a missed opportunity in having appealed to a broader audience.
All right. One of the most awaited, anticipated spots on the Super Bowl this year for those in the advertising world was from this company. Take a look, and then we'll talk about what happened here.
TV, Bob. It's one small step for...
Summarize this article. Help me practice asking for a raise.
Act as my sleep coach.
What bird is this? Actúa como mi tutor.
Turn my idea into a business plan.
What do you want to create next?
Well, there it is. All right, so OpenAI, this was their first advertising, apparently ever, for a ChatGPT. So they went on the Super Bowl with this spot, and so everybody's waiting, looking forward to seeing what they would do. It's going to be a big moment. And here's what they came up with, and, well, what do you think?
I keep watching it, and I keep trying to understand it. I'm a big fan of the ChatGPT platform, so I, too, was excited. I just don't see what job this ad does. Right? What have you told people who are unfamiliar with ChatGPT that what it is? What functionality have you conveyed that the brand offers for those who are familiar with it? And it doesn't have a feel that it's moving to a higher order emotional benefit. It just kind of exists, and that bothers me.
Yeah. It's like, so it's interesting. If you compare the Coffee Mate spot to this spot, like Coffee Mate, I can see what they were trying to do. Like, I get that. I understand the intent of it. This ChatGPT, I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, maybe all those visuals tell a story, but I've watched this now a few times. I can't figure out what story it might be telling. So there must be something here that we're not seeing.
Potentially. I mean, or there's a big missed opportunity. Now, people who are listening might say, but see, you both are watching it a ton. Yeah, but this is our job. And I assure you, I'm not watching it for fun.
Right. Right. Well, you wouldn't watch that one for fun. But what's amazing is, there's so many ways they could have gone with ChatGPT about how do you build that brand, position it, and yet they end up with this, and it just leaves you a little bit scratching your head. It doesn't make you feel warm about ChatGPT. It doesn't make you feel like it's super functional. It doesn't help you understand how it works. It doesn't make you more comfortable with it. It just, to your point, it just sort of is there like a visual...
It's a statement that, yes, everything has a starting point, but I feel like, well, yeah, but where are we going, right? Like, that's what I want to know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a true statement. I guess maybe does everything have an ending point? I don't know. It's, in a way, you could say, this is their first effort at really a big ad campaign. And maybe what we can say is, it takes time, and it's not so easy to do this stuff, and maybe it's a learning curve dynamic here.
And showing up to the Super Bowl is its own statement as well. But again, we saw some brands when we looked at those A's, they showed up and they connected, right? And I think that's the thing. It's not about just, I know it was a football game, but for baseball, it's not about just showing up and going in an at-bat. It's actually hitting the ball. Yeah. Those A's, they hit the ball out of the park.
And one of the interesting things, if you think about ChatGPT and compared to Google, we didn't talk a lot about that Google spot, which is just very sweet and warm. But what's interesting is Google has used their advertising to soften their brand, I think, and make it very emotional and appealing and welcoming. And so we're all sort of comfortable with Google because we think of Google as this sort of friendly, warm company. ChatGPT, for a lot of folks, AI is sort of scary right now. And they're like, it's going to take over the world. I don't know how it works. So ChatGPT could have done something like that. But no, instead you end up with...
Well, that's what I mean. Like, you either take the function, and Google has been great about taking function and integrating it with emotion.
Yeah,
right? As you said, softening. I think that's a great word. there's just so many things that ChatGPT could have done with that ad that it didn't. So, you know, let's keep an eye. I mean, sometimes brands learn lessons and then we see them come back stronger.
Yeah.
But that was a bit of a head scratcher for our panel and for us.
And maybe we'll learn something later that will explain it, and we will see. So, a couple other notable spots. There's so many ads to talk about. You know, one of the challenges when doing something like this is it's so hard to talk about all the ads because we don't have time. But there are some that are notable that we thought were fun to look at and chat about. So let's take a look at some of the really notable spots that landed on the Super Bowl this year. And let's start off with this one.
Look, from the very beginning, football's been a conspiracy to make us hungry. Now, let me tell you where it all started.
And we'll call this a pigskin. Make people crave bacon.
And everybody loves bacon.
I love bacon.
Bacon.
Bacon. Ever ask yourself how Buffalo got a team?
These wings deserve a team.
Yeah. I figured out a good team name for Buffalo, Bill. Buffalo. Buffalo.
They do anything to sell food.
Do I have to be called refrigerator?
Yes. Even Peyton was in on it.
Omaha! Steak. Omaha! Steak.
And they're still at it. This year, we got a halftime show presented by an apple. In a stadium named after
A salad.
Matthew.
Yeah. Hey.
Sorry. You want me to make a movie about a football conspiracy?
Come on, Greta. Bacon's in.
Everybody loves bacon.
No one believes that football was invented to sell
Food! When football makes you hungry, order Uber Eats.
All right, Uber Eats has been doing some great advertising on the Super Bowl in recent years. I'm not sure this one is up to the standard.
You know, I like the concept in the sense that I think it's kind of fun. It's a fun play to say, hey, look, the Super Bowl isn't what you think it is, right? I think the problem is I'm more interested in that conspiracy story than I am in the brand. And I think at the very end, they try to bring it back and be like, so we'll deliver to you. But that wasn't where my intention is. And so I think it's like, when you think about telling the story, again, are you building your brand or are you taking the consumer down a different rabbit hole?
Correct.
So I don't mind the creative idea. I actually kind of like it a lot. Just
very funny, yeah.
Especially if you go back and look at some of Uber's past spots where they've really done a great job making it about the brand. I felt this was a little light.
Correct. I totally agree with that. And if you compare like the Michelob Ultra spot and this spot, you know, Michelob Ultra was all about that brand. And this was sort of a cute story about food and football. But then it takes this whole leap to get to food. And when you're ordering food, you should order Uber Eats. But that's not, to your point, that's not really about the story they told us.
Well, and there's also, I think you could take it one step further, which is probably everyone is good for the game day by the time that ad airs, right? Like, it was early, so I guess maybe they were hoping people had not yet ordered. But boy, if your Super Bowl party is anything like my Super Bowl party, we've made those decisions.
Correct. Yeah. So it's not a terrible spot. But again, that was one you'd love to see a little more linkage. Maybe would have made that one work a little bit more strongly. One of the ads that got a lot of attention on the game this year and a lot of talk value, I think, was this spot. So let's take a look at this one, and we'll see. This came later in the game.
Yeah, I think this is one of your favorites, too.
Exactly right. Let's take a look at this one.
Longest thing we ever do is live our lives. But life doesn't come with an owner's manual. Might have been nice, huh? But that means we get to write our own stories. Freedom is yes, or no, or maybe. Freedom is for everybody, but it isn't free. It's earned. There are real heroes in the world, but not the ones in the movies. Real heroes are humble. They're not driven by pride. Pride is a terrible driver. Freedom is the roar of one man's engine and the silence of another's. Freedom is the ability to inspire. The most sacred thing in life isn't the path. It's the freedom to choose it. You don't have to be friends with someone to wave at them. We won't always agree on which way to go. But our differences can be our strength. So choose, but choose wisely. Choose what makes you happy. My friends, my family, my work make me happy. This Jeep makes me happy, even though my name is That's my owner's manual. Get out there, write your own.
All right, so this was an amazing spot. This is very much in the genre of Stellantis. Has done this type of ad a lot. Big iconic spot, late in the game. Nobody knows they're going to run it. You know, this was imported from Detroit. They did that one a long time ago. And they've had a whole series of these spots. But this one, Harrison Ford talking about freedom and talking about Jeep. I think that spot does a lot of stuff, I think, really nicely for the Jeep brand. And I think that's a winner of a Super Bowl spot.
I think so. You know, this was not among the A's of our panel, but I think if I'm the brand, I'm really happy with this spot because I think this is something that galvanizes the core. They see it, they go, I can relate to it. You think about all the dealerships who can use this footage, use this content, talk about the associations. That becomes really powerful. And I think this is maybe a sleeper iconic spot because I can see talking about this in a few years. Like, yeah, that Jeep spot with Ford, which is a great little play he does there at the end. You know, it says something about the brand that is really powerful.
It does. And there's a lot of nice little things. The way they integrate the Jeep all throughout, it also fits with the brand somehow. And, and it's just like one thing to the next of nice things. I like it how he says what he's about family, friends, his work, this Jeep. And if you go back, Jeep aired a Super Bowl ad with Bill Murray, which was Groundhog's Day a few years back. You know what? And that funny ad, like Bill Murray a lot. He's amazing. Yeah. But I don't think it was a rally cry. I think this is a rally cry. I think this is like something that again, dealers, consumers, brings them together. Yeah, and the match between Harrison Ford and Jeep, you have a sense that's a match there. That seems like a fit on that. I saw somebody in one of the discussions we were doing says, that house, that's what I want. It is amazing. The house he's in, he's got that beautiful dog, the fireplace, but the setting works. It fits with Jeep. It's aspirational. Get out there, write your story. I think it's a great spot. Although, that's for Jeep people, I think. It is. If you're never going to think about a Jeep, if you're a loyal Subaru person, it's not for you. But if you're thinking about a Jeep, no Jeep, like Jeep, that's the kind of thing that's going to reinforce that brand work. Really. And that's something for the audience to keep in mind, especially with like car companies. They're not running these ads so you'll immediately go out and buy a car. That's usually not the intent of a Super Bowl ad for cars, right? It is creating stronger connections, creating loyalty, things of that sort. Fascinating, by the way, that we saw so little from the car companies this year. Was surprising. I think part of it is maybe wondering where EVs will go. So we saw a big, if you look years prior, a bundle of EVs coming and now all of a sudden really quiet. So it'll be interesting to see as I look to next year's Super Bowl, does that change? Yeah. I mean, you wonder what is behind it because it's, there were some years we'd have 12. Yeah. And now we've got 2. What do we have? We had 2 or 3. Ram was on there. Jeep was on there. I guess Toyota ran. Maybe that was a regional. Nothing. It's a small number. It's and there's something behind that is significant. And I think maybe it is the EV uncertainty. Maybe there's something more there around. I don't know, but there's clearly it's not a coincidence. They all. No, I think that's a category I'll keep an eye on for sure as we look to next year. So. All right, now let's get to one of the great battles that we now get to watch on the Super Bowl. So it used to be the Super Bowl was the exclusive terrain of AB InBev. But no longer. Now, the exclusivity, they let that go. And so now we can have these great beer debates. So let's now go to the light beer debate and who won this particular fight on the Super Bowl. I'm going to run 2 spots, and then we'll talk about who got the better of this one.
You want to go fishing tomorrow? I got a colonoscopy tomorrow.
Fellas, I accidentally threw a lame party.
Okay, Ted.
They're on their way. They're here.
Ooh. You call this a party?
Cul-de-sac party.
Launch. These beers are a metaphor for an invitation.
Is that our leaf blower? Party at the sack.
You are cordially invited to the end of the cul-de-sac.
This is incredible.
Your mower smokes meat?
Oh, a smoker cuts grass.
Hell yeah.
I spent most of my money on this. New rig? Fully custom.
How many Bud Lights can you fit in that puppy?
As many Bud Lights as it takes.
A lot of Bud Lights.
This cul-de-sac's popping. Bill, get off the boat. The HOA's already breathing down my neck.
What a game last night.
Monday, Monday. So good to me. Monday morning, it was all I hoped it would be. Oh, Monday morning, you gave me no warning of what was to be. Monday, Monday, can't trust that day. Monday, Monday, sometimes it just turns out that way.
Tomorrow, we'll all have a case of the Mondays. So Coors Light made a better case to help you chill. Get a case of the Mondays.
All right, there you go. There you go. You got two of the iconic brands there, right? Coors Light and Bud Light going up against it. Which one are you giving the edge to?
I'm going to give this one to Bud Light. And I'll tell you why. Because when I think back to that Bud Light spot, I'm going to call it the Bud Light spot. When I think back to the other spot, I'm going to call that the sloth spot. And so I'm much more interested in the sloth characters than I am the beer. And so I think,
good, yeah.
which brand made itself integral to the story? And I think Bud Light just did a better job on that battle.
Right. I think you're right. The linkage, the integration there was, the whole thing. It was like a bad party, and then the Bud Light showed up, and all of a sudden we got a good party. And now we're popping the party on the sack,
Especially as Bud Light tries to come back from some of their prior fumbles. I can see them kind of re-engaging with an audience, kind of showing, without saying it, showing you look, we have a broad audience appeal. Yeah. This is just a beer for the neighborhood party. It's an invitation. So I think they're doing a lot of good strategy work in that too. And I'm focused on the brand. Again, also, I'm a fan of the other product too, but it's much more about the sloths to me.
Yeah. And the Bud Light spot's so much to like there. They integrate the celebrities well.
Yes.
It's another case where if you know them, you know them. If you know, you know. But if you don't know, it's still okay.
And I think they used Peyton. Peyton Manning was in there, and they used him elsewhere too, didn't they?
Well, they did. They cut back. A few of the advertisers did this on the game, where when you cut back to the broadcast, they see the characters involved in doing their things. Who was it? Rocket Mortgage did that with Take Me Home.
That's right. You had the song going in the ad, and then all of a sudden you cut back to the stadium and it's going.
Exactly. And that was, by the way, that was a beautiful ad, but with terrible linkage. Yeah. But let's give them credit for integration. Yeah, they had a whole stadium singing "Take Me Home," which was sort of cute.
It's pretty cool. I mean, it talks about opportunities that as brands look to, how do you make more of the Super Bowl spot than just the spot?
Yes. Now, one of the things also I think is interesting about this Bud Light spot is that it is set at a cul-de-sac in a suburban neighborhood. Now, in past years, Bud Light has been at the club and been downtown in the urban setting. Now, they're at the cul-de-sac in the neighborhood. I don't think that's a coincidence that sort of aligns with the change in administration and a change in sort of mentality a little bit in our country.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely if it is a coincidence, then someone should be looking over that and talking wait, do you realize you're suggesting a different usage occasion, things of that sort? I think you're right. I think it'll be really interesting as Bud tries to rebuild their equity, what it looks like. Both Bud Light and Budweiser, because we didn't talk about it, didn't show it, but Budweiser was also back, right? And we saw the Clydesdales back, and they talked before about not needing the Clydesdales. Correct. And now they're back. So it'll be really interesting to watch what this brand continues to do, especially where you see the competition has no problem coming in the Super Bowl and kind of trying to claim territory.
Correct. And I thought overall, though, it's a good year for AB InBev. If you look at the rundown of their brands, that Ultra spot was great. The Budweiser spot I thought was really sweet, especially the long version. They didn't run that on the game, but that was a really nice spot. Bud Light was great. And then they had the Stella Artois spot. I thought the Stella spot was really nice as well with Beckham and Dave Beckham, both of them.
Yeah, will be interesting because I think Budweiser we've sometimes seen at the top of our pack getting A's. We'll see if they're going to bring that back in the years to come.
I know. I think did some really nice work. On the sloths, I am totally with you on the sloths. That was a very funny spot. Maybe my favorite spot overall. but not as a marketing person. I mean, creatively, that's just great. I mean, the sloth is there. They toss him a beer. And he's like,
can't get to it. Yeah, it's great.
It's a great scene. But just that link. Also, I don't get the Mondays. The whole idea of the Mondays, we're going to have a case of the Mondays, so you need a case of Coors Light. See, I got the brand wrong. But even the whole premise that like you're having a slow Monday, so you should drink some Coors Light, I'm just not sure that's a winning formula.
I think our panel struggled with that too. And so it could be we're dense and we missed some things, and we'll hear about it as you're seeing this. And you're like, hey, here's the answer. But again, the best advertising doesn't require a script. It doesn't require me to follow along.
Yeah, you sort of get it.
You sort of get it.
All right. So we talk about sort of a change in tonality, and I think we did see that on the Super Bowl this year. I mean, it was very traditional values. Unspoken, right? Nobody actually said this, but if you look at the imagery there, it was a lot about families, traditional suburbs, which was really interesting. Then we also had this happen, and I thought this was a milestone. Now, this is a regional spot, so not an official Super Bowl ad, but it's a Super Bowl promotion. And I think it's an interesting reflection of where we are right now. So take a look at this one.
Let's be real. Everyone's going to be a hot mess after the big game. And I've got just what you need to cure that post-party bug. The Carl's Jr. Hangover Burger. It's free the day after the big game. You just have to download the Carl's Jr. app and sign up for my rewards.
All right, there you go. So now you know the story of this. The Carl's Jr. journey?
Well, it depends on where that story starts. I mean, they've been known for having racy advertising in their past, in their past DNA.
Absolutely, it's there for sure. That was their whole thing. They had Paris Hilton,
right?
And this was the whole thing. They had women in bikinis washing cars and eating hamburgers. Very racy stuff. Then, though, what's fascinating is in 2017, they said, you know what?
We're done.
We're done with that. We can't, it's not appropriate anymore to do that kind of thing in the era of like Me Too and all of that. We can't be doing that kind of advertising anymore. So they pivoted away. They started talking about the food. But now, this year, they're back. They're right back at it, which to me is sort of this amazing moment that, wait, you're back at it now? And I think it does a little bit reflect some changes in our country. I'm not sure for the best, but I think it does. They're on the cutting edge, I think, of some shifts that are happening in the country that you saw in the Super Bowl. But here you see, I think, with a lot of sort of intensity. It's really interesting.
The thing that I'd love to see is their long-term strategic thinking on this, because we do talk here at Kellogg that you can attract one consumer at the cost of another, that you can alienate non-users, if you will. And the question I want to play back is, so do you think that the size of the group you can own is sufficiently big that you're willing to alienate people who are like, I'm not going to eat there? Because there's a lot of people, I think, who will see the ad and go, that is not what I want to be where I want to be taking my kids, what I want to be associating with. And so does the brand have the strategic observation that, right, but this is who we're going to own? Because, Burger King tried this years ago. It wasn't racy per se, but was they used the creepy king and this weird eclectic individual.
For sure, yeah.
And they lost share. It's like, because they narrowed their target. So the question I'll have about this is, if they continue along this path, which given they started down, it would seem odd for them to then do another 180. Are you actually going to be able to grow through this user? So that's going to be my big question as I track it as a strategist.
Yeah, it's sort of a mathematical equation. It's like the upside with this group, because that, I guess, is attention, distinction, a lot of positives there, but then you lose here, and does that math work?
Exactly. And so, I think if you ask, how will you ever know? Oh, we'll know. I think you'll watch and see how brands pivot and change strategies. And so we'll know.
Well, you will for sure know, because the only way you know for sure if a company likes their strategy and likes their creatives is if they stick with it.
That's right.
And like you look at Super Bowl ads and you wonder, is a company happy with their Super Bowl advertising and that investment? You know how you know? If they come back and if they do it again, then you know. Oh, one brand this year I thought was fascinating was WeatherTech.
Oh, yes.
So WeatherTech has been on the Super Bowl for a very long time. 10, 12 years, right? Now, what was really interesting, though, is last year, if you remember, they weren't. They didn't buy a Super Bowl ad. They bought an ad before the Super Bowl.
That's right.
And they probably said, is it really worth all that money? But this year, they're back on the Super Bowl, which tells you they clearly think there is power in a Super Bowl ad because they tried it without it. And then they said, oh, no, we're going back.
Yeah.
And that tells you something.
There are a few brands that sometimes try it and then they file bankruptcy. So that's different. But I think with WeatherTech, too, they're interesting on the watch. I thought this one, while not by no means a perfect ad, they were getting a little better at what they're doing. Because I remember that when they first started out, I'm just like, what was this for? I don't understand. And I'm starting to see them build in their story, which is great.
It is. And I like that WeatherTech spot. It's a little bit more about the product and about the benefit. And they were a lot of times made in America, which I think is a good thing.
Oh, I think that's a good thing for them right now.
It's a good thing, but especially for a product that maybe people don't know about. You know, you compare WeatherTech and Lay's. We all know Lay's. WeatherTech, I'm not sure everybody knows WeatherTech. So if you say WeatherTech's made in the U.S., you're like, well, that's okay. I don't even know what they are, but that's good. Lay's, we already know Lay's. That maybe the message there works better. For WeatherTech, getting back to here's the floor liners, here's what we do. That works out. Really
Absolutely. So we'll see, but it wouldn't surprise me if we see them come back again.
Exactly right. There was so much other advertising on the Super Bowl. A lot to talk about. The nerd spot was fabulous. That was great. Pfizer was on the game this year, doing some interesting things, getting people to feel better about pharma. That's money well spent, by the way. There was a lot of other interesting advertising. We'll post a lot of our thoughts on the website.
There's a lot of things we don't have time to cover today, but if you go online, look at what we've done. We've reviewed quite a few of them.
Absolutely. So learnings. Let's get to learnings then. What are the big takeaways this year? What do you think you take away as a marketer when you look at what's happening on the Super Bowl this year and what happened and what worked? And what do you take away from all that?
You know, we touched on this, but I do think there are some lessons in like the good and bad use of celebrity. So a good example is I think we talked about the Michelob Ultra, where I thought Defoe, O'Hara, like they funneled attention in a nice way. They didn't get in front of the ad too much. I do think, we didn't explicitly get into it, but McConaughey was on a few things. He was on, I think, Agent Force, and was also on the Uber Eats. And I started thinking more about the celebrity than the brands. And so I think there's a learning, taking a step back for those like, hey, which ads actually use the celebrity to really focus the message on the brand versus made it more. I think that's something we see every year, but I think there's some nice examples from this year. So that was one thing that really stood out to me.
So I think you're exactly, this whole complexity of working effectively with influencers, I think is really, is really a big deal. What struck me this year is, number one, these brands were playing it so safe. And I get that though. I'm 100% supportive. The downside on the Super Bowl is so big right now, and that's true for the companies, it's true for the individuals involved in this, that, it is far better to put on an adequate spot than to do something that could really polarize people. And so it just makes a lot of sense to do that. I think you want to be careful always when it comes to taking risks creatively. You want to be careful about risk that will polarize versus risk that maybe not resonate as much. Like the sloths, that was maybe a creative risk. But it didn't offend anybody.
No, not at all. Not at all.
And I think that's sort of an interesting point. The other thing that always strikes me is you come back to the basics of positioning and how important it is to just make sure people know what you are and why they should use you. And
it's a wonder that simple little observation can carry so much weight.
Well, you go back to that, and if you just ask those basic questions, it gets you a long way down that journey of doing effective advertising. And then you avoid things like the ChatGPT fiasco because you would have answered some of the questions.
It really does. And my last observation, and my one surprise from this year is that the Super Bowl really can be for a number of brands that you might not typically think of. If you look at our winner, right?
Yeah,
can pharma? Yes, pharma can win. It might be a good place. So I think that made me think about, the Super Bowl isn't just for a packaged goods brand, right? It's not just for a car brand. Given the reach for the right brand with the right message, it can be for a lot of categories.
Absolutely. The whole idea of the creativity. Oh, we can't do that. Or in our little box, we can't be creative. We can't do emotional things. It's just
some nice evidence against that.
People go and do really interesting stuff with all of these things. So there you go. A lot to talk about on all of these things. If you have questions on Super Bowl ads or marketing in general, feel free to get in touch with us. We are easy to reach. For all of our ratings, all of our grades, for all the spots, you can check out the website. You can also see our commentary there. I've got a website and a newsletter you can visit and sign up for that. I'll be posting stuff there. Get in touch with us. Get in touch with me. Get in touch with Derek. We're around, and we like talking about this stuff, so certainly circle back. It has been a pleasure doing this. It is always fun to talk about this, Derek. So
cannot wait for next year to see the new crop of ads and the new crop of advertisers.
There you go. It is amazing. Every year it's new stuff, new themes, new things to talk about. We'll look forward to getting back and doing it all again in 2026. So, very good. Thanks, everybody. Take care, Derek. Thank you. A pleasure.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.